All right. Hello, everyone. We are going to get started. I'm going to ask that you remain on mute until, or at least while I'm speaking. And there will be time at the end for questions where we'll stop the recording. But we are recording right now and we are also live. So if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I will be looking at the chat. If you have something where you want to talk, just put your hand up, like use the raise hand feature, and we can do that also. So with that being said, we're going to get started. Okay. So welcome to Living Well with ADHD, how to improve your planning. This is certainly a topic that I get asked about a lot, and it's also one that I love teaching about. So as a quick intro, my name is Emily Whelden. I am one of the team coaches at Dixon Life Coaching. We are a coaching company for high achievers with ADHD. I'm a former attorney myself, and I work primarily with lawyers and other high achievers who have ADHD or chronic illness and ADHD. All right, so today we are going to be working on, we're going to start out with a quick discussion about why planning is so difficult for people with ADHD. We're then going to talk about the number one most common pitfall that I see in my practice. And we're going to talk about why this pitfall is a pitfall, why it makes your planning ineffective. And then finally, we're going to talk about how we fix this in our day-to-day. And I'll give you a short preview of other potential resources that we have available to you as well.
Emily, before you continue, sorry, everyone, this is Christine. I'm here for technical difficulties. I just want to let you know, I can't see your presentation anymore. So I want to make sure that we get that problem fixed before we move on. So
definitely.
Just FYI, let's see if we can get that up really quick.
Sure. Okay, can you see it now?
Yes, we see the title screen now.
Fantastic. Okay, so just a quick review. My name is Emily Whelden, and this is our roadmap. We're going to cover why planning is so challenging, what the number one pitfall we fall into is, why this is a pitfall such that it makes our plan ineffective, and how we fix that. Okay, so why is planning so difficult when you have ADHD? That's one of the number one questions I get when I say that I'm an ADHD coach, and I love to talk about planning with ADHD. Well, ADHD is an executive functioning disorder. The ADHD makes planning so difficult. I know it's a little circular, but we know that ADHD impacts our prefrontal cortex. That's the part of your brain right behind your forehead right here. And the prefrontal cortex is where your executive functions live. ADHD impacts other areas of the brain, but we're not going to talk about those today because this is really what we're focused on, executive functions. So the executive functions, those are the things that you're in your brain that allow you to do things that are directed towards a goal. So people with ADHD have trouble consistently managing their executive functions because of the way our prefrontal cortex is structured and also the way that our brain uses neurochemicals, right? That's the disorder part of executive functioning disorder from ADHD. So importantly, everyone struggles with executive functions throughout their life and at various points throughout their life. But people with ADHD or other executive functioning disorders will experience difficulties with these more frequently or to greater degrees than neurotypical people. So how is this impacting our planning? Well, you might have noticed that planning and organizing are two of our top 10 executive functions for ADHD. There are lots of different executive function lists or charts. This is our Dixon Life Coaching's top 10 list of executive functions for high achievers. So you can see that planning and organizing are both impacted by ADHD. So this makes it more difficult for us to both remember to plan, but then also to think through and conceptualize our plans, and then also to organize information effectively so that we can plan. You may also have challenges with sustained effort or focus and inattention, which then make it more difficult to execute on our plans, right? So we have challenges around planning itself, and then also challenges around following through with our plans because of ADHD. So I want your key takeaway from this section to be that it's not your fault. Planning is difficult. It's your neurobiology that's making the big difference. Right. All right. How do our executive function challenges show up in planning? Let's talk about it. The most common pitfall that I see with clients and myself is treating projects as tasks and then underestimating the scope of a project or task. These are technically two separate pitfalls, but they're so frequently seen together that I pair them. So how do you know if you're doing this? Well, things often take you longer, much longer than you expect them to. That's one way. Things may also often be more complicated than you thought they were going to be initially. Maybe you generally have only a few items on your to-do list, but you don't have any details or information available, right? Like this is the person who writes do work on their to-do list, or work on big document, big project, and nothing else. You also maybe find that you can't cross things off your to-do list, even though you've made significant progress or you spent a lot of time on them during the day. This might be because you're conflating projects and tasks. Maybe you can't really articulate the difference between a project and a task. Maybe you can identify a project and a task as separately two distinct things, but you don't change how you approach the project or the task based on the size or complexity of it. All right, so why does this derail your plan? Well, first, part of the project is not included in your plan. When you treat a project like a task, you're more likely to forget to include part of the project. So this leads you to either have a half-finished work product or be late completing the project. The second is it leads to unexpected challenges or decisions that need to be made in the moment. As you may know, it's much more cognitively taxing to make decisions in the moment. So as ADHD coaches, one of the things that we like to recommend at Dixon Life Coaching is that you're trying to make decisions in advance. Decisions in advance are going to use less executive functioning energy, less neurocognitive energy than making decisions in the moment. And if you don't make decisions in advance, then you're more likely to fall into other potential ADHD traps like rabbit holes or unplanned hyperfocusing, or focusing on the wrong thing, getting really onto the details of something that you over here where maybe you should be focused over here. So all those other ADHD traps. Third, it's going to just take longer than you think it will. I can guarantee that the task will take longer than you think it will. And that's because it's not really a task. So this is going to increase the likelihood that you'll become rushed, feel stressed or anxious, which might push you into ADHD paralysis where you just shut down. Or it might force you to push other tasks or projects back. So you get stuck in a cycle of feeling behind, and that does not feel good for anyone. So, also fourth, the fourth thing is because you've underestimated the scope of a project, you're going to be much less likely to be able to ask for help in advance, right? So you don't know that there's going to be this part that you can delegate, or you don't think of delegating something until it's way too late. And maybe you're going to end up doing that thing, even if it's not the thing you're best at or the thing you enjoy, because there's just not enough time to ask someone else to help you with it. Okay, so if you all want to take a quick second and put in the chat any other ways that you think treating projects as tasks might cause problems, or anything that you're noticing has caused you problems treating a project as a task. Be a minute to put that in. Nothing? No ideas? Not seeing connections. Not seeing interconnections, rather, Deidre. So interconnections being like how steps flow from one to another, or how parts of a project maybe overlap, so you're not doing duplicate work. Yes, exactly. Putting too many projects or tasks on your to-do list. Yes, that's another indication that maybe you're treating things as smaller than they are, right? This idea that, oh, I can put 20 things on my to-do list for today and I'm going to finish them all. No, you're not. Great example. Treating all tasks as projects. Yes, that is still conflating the two, mixing task and project, right? So making something more complicated than it needs to be. I get frustrated that I have a task framed project. I have a task framed project keeps carrying over to my next days. Yes, it feels like you're spinning your wheels, like you're never making progress because you're not putting it on your to-do list, or you're not conceptualizing it as a project with multiple parts that can be accomplished. It's a whole or it's nothing, right? Can't estimate duration of tasks or projects, so it never ends. Yes, you don't know the scope. It's much harder to estimate how long you should spend on something, or how long you'll have to spend on something. And we already know that time blindness is something that's very difficult for people with ADHD. Really hard for us to know how long we're spending on something and how long we should be spending on something. Everything is interconnected. One job leads to another, So everything that ends up in a doom spiral. Yes. Okay, Susan coming in with some solutions already, but yes and no. You start and don't finish. Oh, I see. Okay, so how do we know if it's a project or a task? I talk about this distinction more in Planning Power Up, but I want to discuss the relationship between projects and tasks so that you can start to think about how to decide whether something is a project or a task. So I've included this little slide here. This is a preview slide, just so you know. If you take Planning Power Up, which I'll talk about a little more later, you will see this slide again. So this is the difference between a project and a task, or at least this is a brief intro, and we're going to dive in a little more deeply in a minute. So generally, a project has multiple tasks to complete in order to complete the project. So see how I have like 2 tasks here at minimum? If you have 2 independent tasks in order to complete a larger thing, you have a project. That's all you need, 2 tasks. And then tasks have smaller steps that I like to call micro tasks. I call these micro tasks because I had a client once call them idiot steps, and I didn't like how that sounded. It sounded very shaming, right? We're not idiots. We need the little mini micro tasks, right? And the micro tasks, this is where people with ADHD get stuck a lot, right? we think of a task as a singular thing, right? But really, there's lots of little steps along the way that results in a task being completed. So for example, if I need to send a short email, that's going to be a task. But the micro tasks might be open my email folder, find the email address I need to send the email to, click write new email, compose email, actually write the email within that new blank email, and then hit send. But if I have this on my to-do list, I'm probably just going to say send email to, and then whoever it is. And maybe I'm not going to include all of those little things. For most of the time, we don't need to include all the little teeny tiny steps, right? But maybe on a really bad, distractible day, you are going to need the micro steps. So you want to have that micro task option in your toolkit in order to layer on top of your otherwise normal planning structure. Also, it's really fun to tick off micro tasks on your to-do list. You just be like, oh, I did that, I did that, I did that. It's very satisfying if you're a to-do list planner person, which I hope all of you are since you're here. Okay, so what kinds of qualities make a project a project? So some things I think of. If it has multiple sections or large tasks, right? If I'm a former lawyer, when I was practicing, I wrote a lot of briefs. I was a litigator. I did litigation and appellate work and all kinds of other stuff, but I wrote a lot of briefs. A brief is a project in that it has multiple sections, right? You can break out a section of a brief and work on it, and then break out another section and another, and so on. A project cannot be finished in one sitting. For the most part, there are smaller projects that can be finished in one sitting, but for the most part, they probably cannot be finished in one sitting. Or if you have something that you cannot finish in one sitting and you're not sure if it's a project or a task, that kicks it more towards the project mindset, or the project framework rather. You're writing it on your to-do list and describing it with nouns. If you have put blank deliverable, right? Like Jones task, Jones project, Jones brief, Jones email, Jones whatever. That's probably a project. Tasks we more often tend to instinctually write with verbs as an action word within our to-do list. It's probably going to be really vague when you've written it on your to-do list. A project can be very large and complex, or it can be relatively straightforward. So if you have something that's super complicated, that might mean it's a project. But if you have something that's really straightforward, that might also be a project, right? So it's not an either or. You might need more than one person to complete this project. If it's something you don't know is a project or a task, if you need more than one person, probably a project. Projects also often involve different types of work. So what do I mean by that? I mean something like you're going to be writing and then you're going to proofread and then you're going to design graphics or something like that, right? Different kinds of work. Whereas a task, maybe you're doing the same kind of thing over and over again to a relatively small conclusion. Conversely, you may need to do the same step repeatedly, right? You may have a repetitive task within a project, but the scope of that repetitive task is probably going to be larger, or it's going to involve many repetitions, right? So if you're a data scientist or a data analyst, maybe you need to review a database and you need to clean up each row of that database, each entry in that database for a specific thing, but you need to do it 1,000 times, or you need to figure out a way to automate doing it 1,000 times, right? So that's a project. Whereas something like I need to send 3 of the same email to 3 different people That's maybe a task, or at least 3 tasks. Okay, so what are some examples? So as you can see, I've got professional and personal examples here because projects exist both at work and in your home life. So for me, setting up holiday decorations is a project. We have multiple rooms or areas to set up. Usually I am a big Christmas decoration person. We also might take multiple days to do that, right? You might set up the living room on one day and then your stairwell display or something on another day. And you might need more than one person to do this if you go really over the top like I do. Or that could be a task of set up your Christmas tree or set up your garland or whatever holiday you celebrate. Setting up a singular item. That's a task versus a project, which is, I definitely lean towards project for holiday decorations. Writing a legal brief, right? You might need to research different points of law and determine the strategy and draft multiple sections and then proofread it and file it. Those multiple steps can't be completed over one day. That's a project, right? Even hosting a webinar like this, right? Relatively, I've got to plan what I'm going to say, and then I've got to write these lovely slides and format them and make sure that, you know, the free guide you guys are going to be getting at the end or in the follow-up emails is ready to go. And I've got to present and talk, and Christine, our lovely admin support, has stuff she needs to do, and we have to market this, and right, so that's a project. What about tasks? So tasks have those mini steps that must be completed, which I'm calling micro tasks. They probably can be finished in one sitting, right? So this is the thing you sit down, you work on for 20 minutes, maybe an hour, and you can finish it. Single task. They are usually used, we describe them with action words. We're more instinctually describing them with action words because they are actionable. They are action tasks. They likely can be completed by one person. I would say if you have a task that is either a repetitive task and maybe it's a repetitive task and there's different components to the task that you're each doing the same version just on different entries. You might think of those as tasks, but that's leaning more towards project for me. A task might be a large thing, but it's probably smaller than you think. Or it might feel like a large thing, but actually be not that complicated. When you have a chance to think it through, there's a clear scope to it. That's a task, something that has a clear beginning, middle, and end, or a clear deliverable for you to provide at the end, or this is obviously finished, or this is obviously not finished. That leans a bit more towards task for me. Generally, it's going to involve only one kind of work or skill, right? So this is not research and write. That's a project, right? This is just research or just write or just read, that kind of thing. And it may need the same step completed repeatedly, like a repetitive task, but this is a simple or small step. So as some examples, emptying the dishwasher. This is a task, at least for me. Repeated micro tasks, right? I'm going to take each item out individually. I can't just take the whole dishwasher out and it magically gets put away in my cupboards, right? I have to take each plate out repeatedly, but I can do it in a short time. It's clearly finished when the dishwasher is empty versus when it's full, and it can be done by one person. It doesn't have to be, people can help, but it can be completed by one person. Writing a simple email, right? A clearly defined scope, clearly defined and small scope. It can be done by one person. Probably you're not writing most of your emails by committee, though as a lawyer, I know we do sometimes write emails by committee. And it's going to take just a few steps, those micro steps. I'm hearing a little bit of an echo. So if you are unmuted, I'm going to ask you to mute for a I'm going to mute you. Okay. We're going to do questions at the end when we turn off the recording. But if you have questions in the meantime, you can put those into the chat. Susanna from Alexandria. Oh, I'm in Alexandria, Susanna. That's a funny small world. What happens when you open your email and are flooded with new emails you need to handle? Susanna, that is a great question. Unfortunately, it's also a question that is too large for this specific thing. But I would say, if I had to give you some specific advice, and this is not coaching, because if we were coaching about it, we would co-create the strategy, you would come up with something that felt real. I would say think of each email as a task within the project of managing email. If we're keeping it in the planning project versus task world, opening each email and figuring out what it says and what it's asking of you, that's a task. But doing that multiple times repeatedly, maybe dozen, 20 times, project. Okay. I'm glad I could help. I will also validate that email is one of the most difficult things for people with ADHD. Because for exactly the reason you say, you go to look at one thing and then you're flooded with lots of different information. I have coached almost every single one of my clients, my lawyer clients, on how to keep up with email. So just it's hard for us all. Okay, so how do I use this in real life, Emily? Well, two things. Practical tips. Regularly asking yourself, is this a project or is this a task? I know it sounds simple. I know it sounds like, God, that's just like another thing that another ADHD coach giving me some useless platitude. No, this is not actually useless. It's not saying use my planner and it will fix your life. Asking yourself repeatedly, is this a project or is this a task, trains your brain to look for the distinction between a project or a task. It assumes that there is a difference and that you need to approach a project differently than you need to approach a task. So you're actually leveraging your neuroplasticity and training your brain on a skill that it is not inherently or not instinctually going to build for itself. So finding ways to work this question into your planning routine can actually help you avoid this pitfall, right? Saying, is this a project or is this a task? Intentionally, on purpose, repeatedly throughout the day is going to give you a better idea of how you might be conflating projects and tasks previously. Second, when you notice yourself jumping in without planning, pause. We all do it all the time. Every single one of us has done this at least once this week, where we don't think through what we're going to do and we just jump in and start doing it, right? When you find yourself doing that, step back and say, let's pause. Is this a project or is this a task? What are the tasks? What are the micro tasks? What do I need to do? Am I thinking of this? Am I making this more complicated than it needs to be? Am I making it less complicated than it needs to be? Am I oversimplifying it? Right? When you notice that impulse to jump in, stop, take a beat, take a step back. Okay. Another thing you can do, you can download our free project versus task worksheet. It's got all the things, the key projects, project versus task slides that I had up. It's got those. It also has some key questions to help you think through, is this a project or a task, some coaching questions. And that will be up on our website at ditsonlifecoaching.com/resources soon. It's not up quite right now. I don't know when it will go live, probably within the next 24 hours.
It should go live tomorrow. And is that also the resource that we will be emailing out?
Yes.
Yes, so you will all also get it in your email.
Excellent. Okay, great. Thank you, Christine. Christine, our admin extraordinaire. And then the second thing you can do is join me at Planning Power Up. So this is a workshop that I host all about planning. It's very practical, very fast paced. So if you're easily bored, you won't be, because I talk at 1.5 speed the whole time. You'll also have an opportunity to join other high achievers with ADHD to figure out how to take your planning to the next level. I think one of our past participants might be in the chat in the Zoom call today, but I'm not entirely sure. But it's also really great to meet other high achievers and see what they're doing for planning, how you can respond to your own challenges, how they're responding to their challenges, seeing the overlap. It's coming up. We're going to be hosting this on Saturdays, or 2 Saturdays in June, June 1st and June 15th. It will be from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern, US Eastern. So yeah, that's 6 hours worth of content about planning. We're going to cover the 5 most common pitfalls of planning. We covered number 1 today, but we're going to cover the other 4. And we're also going to look at how you can make your planning more effective using our 4-step performance model for high achievers with ADHD. We'll also talk about the foundations of planning. So what the foundations of planning are, what kinds of plans you should be thinking about making, how to make them, what makes them effective. And specifically, I cover master task lists, project plans, and daily plans. And then I'm also going to talk about how to estimate how long something is going to take you. So yeah, we don't teach how long things are going to take anywhere else. So if you want to know how to figure out how long it will take you to do something, that's where you got to go. And you can register at our website, dixonlifecoaching.com. The link is right there. The link to sign up for the Power Up is right there, but you can also find it from our homepage under group classes if you lose the link. And I imagine Christine will also include that in the follow-up email. Okay, so for now, I'm going to stop screen sharing and we're going to stop the recording, right, Christine? And